have another guest with us. We have Tara Harris. Tara, good morning.
Good morning.
How's the weather out there first? That's what we need to know.
It's actually pretty nice right now. We've still got some snow on the ground, but it's melting and starting to feel like spring. I think we're supposed to have highs in the 40s today.
Awesome. So what part of Colorado are you in?
Southwestern corners, a little bit west of Durango. That's the biggest city we're close to.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us what kind of work you do and what your title is, and give us just a brief introduction into your where you're at career wise.
Okay, yeah. So right now I'm working for a small business. Um, they mainly do like wildlife removal projects. So people who have issues with nuisance wildlife on their property. That's how the company started. It's called San Juan Wildlife Services. They brought me on as the wildlife technician because the company owner, my supervisor, wants to start getting into government contracting for doing wildlife surveys, mostly for public lands agencies like Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management. So yeah, I've been heading up that part of the business. I have sort of a weird title right now because I'm wildlife technician and like marketing and procurement specialist.
Yeah.
Been doing a lot of website stuff just to get things going, but hopefully this year I'll be out in the field.
Awesome. Where are you originally from?
Corbin, Kentucky.
Corbin, Kentucky. And that's I mean, what is that, like an hour north of Knoxville?
Yeah.
Okay. And for the folks in this chat, it's like an hour north of Knoxville. What I mean, 2.5 hours south of Cincinnati.
Yeah. 3 hours
Three.
about.
Okay. All right. three
Yeah.
hours. And uh, so you graduated from Corbin. Did you grow up there like your entire life?
Yeah, I did.
What kind of stuff did you do for fun in and around Corbin, Kentucky?
Mostly horseback riding, but a lot of hiking, backpacking, and camping too.
And I
So,
know you enjoyed horseback riding. How long have you been doing that? Since you were a little bitty kid?
yeah, and my mom has pictures of me on horses before I could walk. So
Yeah. So, where did you go to college, and what did you study?
I went to Eastern Kentucky University and I studied natural resources management there.
And that's where I met you.
Yes.
So, when you talk about your natural resource background, what kind of courses did you take, and what were some of the things you got involved in as a student?
Um, let's see, what were some of the ooh, it's been a minute since college. I was involved in the outdoor recreation club, and we did hikes and kind of got, people in the department involved in the community and getting outside. A lot of my classes revolved around doing surveys and research stuff. We've spent a lot of time in the Red River Gorge doing like visitor use surveys and things like that, which um, that's how I got started doing what I'm doing now.
What are some of the stuff you did for fun in college?
Lots of hiking, spent a lot of weekends at the Red River Gorge. The rec department was a fun place with a lot of fun people and enjoyed hanging out with everyone and doing what we liked.
Yeah. So, from your college days up until recently, what kind of jobs or uh, positions have you had? And what have you been involved in professionally?
I've mostly been working seasonally for the Forest Service since college. I spent one stint working for the Bureau of Land Management in South Dakota. I got started with an internship through Student Conservation Association right out of college, working for the Forest Service in Oregon. And that's what got me started on the Forest Service career. From there, I worked in Idaho, Colorado, and then South Dakota, and back to Colorado doing different positions in forestry and working as a wildlife technician mostly.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the SCA, what that is, and how you got involved in it?
Yeah, so the Student Conservation Association is a really good way to get started in a natural resources career. They take students in college and just out of college, maybe up to like a year or two. I don't remember exactly, but they have programs all over the US, and they do various types of jobs. A lot of them revolve around like trail maintenance, clearing, but some of them are more research related or like my job in particular was as an interpretive field ranger. So I worked a lot with the public and led tours and talked about the natural history and the natural resources of that place where I worked.
Before your current position, what has been some of your favorite things you've done in those various positions?
My favorite position was actually in when I lived in South Dakota for a little while. I worked for the Bureau of Land Management. I was a wildlife technician, and we went all over the state. We worked some in North Dakota and at Theodore Roosevelt National Park as well. We did a lot of like vegetation monitoring surveys. So spent a lot of time out on the prairie, which once you get to know it pretty well is actually a lot more interesting than it looks from the distance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I also got to do bumblebee surveys, which was a lot of fun. We would uh, capture them in nets, and you put them in this little vial and put them in a cooler so they get cold and it slows them down, and then you can really take a good look at them and identify what type they are. And um, I did waterfowl surveys and just got into a lot of different things that was really fun. It really broadened my experience, and every day was something new and interesting.
So you talked about Oregon and then South Dakota. What kind of led you along those paths? What made you decide to go to Oregon and then move across several states and then move across several states again?
That's so when you work seasonally for the Forest Service, that kind of becomes, um, you look at all the jobs. I don't know if your class has talked about USA jobs at all, but that's typically where you find government positions, especially with public lands agencies. So you start looking at all the different places popping up all over the map. And if you like to travel like I do, and I always, always wanted to go to Oregon, always wanted to spend more time out west. I'd only been a couple times when I was younger. I just decided to go for it, apply to that job in Oregon. Honestly, didn't think I would get it. But it happened. And then I had the bug, and for a few years really enjoyed the seasonal life of moving around and meeting new people, living in government housing, things like that.
So how many states have you worked in so far, you think?
Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, and South Dakota. So four.
Okay. Did you do any work in Kentucky while you were there with the Forest Service or anything?
No.
Okay. Just what? So what do you see yourself doing long term in the future? Do you think you're going to stay out west or try to migrate back toward home or?
I think for now, definitely plan on staying out here. I have a house out here now, and my husband and I do. Um, and I like the job I'm doing. I'm excited about things picking up and being able to actually get out in the field. I've spent a lot of time last year just in front of the computer, doing a lot of marketing, reaching out to different agencies, and I think I've got some work lined up for the season. I'm going to be doing, hopefully, last year we kind of got stuff started, but haven't spoken this year as of yet, but got some stuff lined up on the Gunnison National Forest and some other contracts we're going to apply for.
So that kind of leads me into my next question a little bit. So tell us a little bit more about the things you're doing in your current job. You know, what is you talked about some of these projects you got on. So tell us a little bit about more what they entail, and you know, for folks looking to get in a similar job as you, is, you know, what kind of things could they look forward to doing day in and day out and long term?
Yeah. So the projects that I'm working towards starting are a lot of wildlife and plant related surveying, monitoring, research with the Forest Service. On the Gunnison in particular, they want me to do alpine. Um, sorry, oh, what happened?
Uh oh. Pause.
Am I back?
There we go.
Okay. So they want me to do alpine plant surveys, and they have some bat work they want. They have some old mines on their forest that they would like to close, but they want to make sure they're not trapping any bats in the mine closures.
Sure. Well, which one do you think you're going to look forward to the most?
Probably the alpine plant surveys. I'm really, really interested in just anything that can survive above tree line up in the high country. It's pretty harsh up there, and there's so many wildflowers that grow. You know, late spring, summer is a gorgeous time to be there. Sorry, something weird is happening with my phone.
Can you see us?
Let's see. Okay. Now everyone's back. But yeah, that I think spending some time in the high country doing plant surveys, that's something I haven't done yet.
So, I mean, tell us something, not just with your current position, but overall, if you and with your current position too, I guess. But tell us some things that you think that you've enjoyed most, and some of the challenges you face in your career path and what you're doing now.
Yeah. Keep switching. I'm not sure. If you can still see me, it's fine. Yeah, overall, the things I've enjoyed with my career, especially with the Forest Service, I enjoyed working as part of a crew. You know, that can be both a challenge and um, something that's really enjoyable because most of the people are pretty similar, have similar interests, and um, it's just fun getting outside and doing work with other people. Right now, I do a lot by myself, which can be a challenge. Spending, which I'm sure most everyone has gotten pretty familiar with this past year, just spending a lot of time by myself
Yeah.
and computer. Um, but you know, if you're interested in plants or if you're interested in wildlife, you really get to dive into particular species, you know, depending on where you work. Like in South Dakota, when I was getting to look at bumblebees, you know, a couple times a week, that was a lot of fun. I learned new skills and um, got to do something that most people don't get to do. And if you're a particular type of bird or particular type of plant, you just kind of expand a skill set you might not have, you know, had the chance to really get involved in and develop without, working in a job like that. And I think my career in the Forest Service really helped lead me to the job I'm in now, because without all that field experience, um, I definitely wouldn't have been qualified to take this position as a wildlife technician for a private company, um, and run with it and develop this side of his business so that we can start doing the things that I used to do for the Forest Service.
So, could you tell us a little bit more about your alpine plant survey and what that entails and how you go about that?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what the survey layout would be, but I know the plant surveys I've done in the past, you usually have, you run transect lines, so you'll just have this big measurement tape, and you'll usually create a circle. So you'll have like a center point and then 3 lines running out. And then within that radius and down each of those lines, you're looking at what plants are present and how much are present. So a lot of it, you're identifying what's there, looking for any rare species, and then if there's anything that should be, maybe more present or used to be more present than it is now. So most of the surveying is looking at changes over time, because more than likely people have been doing those surveys for a few years or even more. And so they're just looking at, how, whether it's grazing, sometimes Forest Service offers ranchers different lots where they can graze their cattle. So a lot of the surveys will monitor overgrazing or, effects of climate and things like that.
And I don't want to get into too much of it, but and especially that area, Idaho and some of those other areas with those grazing rights have been kind of a hot topic in the last 5 to 10 years, right? So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm glad they're monitoring it and seeing it. It's I wonder, I look forward to hearing some feedback, whatnot as you go through that process. Um,
Yeah.
so if the next stuff is what I consider the fun questions, right? Is like, if you could have your dream job, or if you were doing something differently, you could pick what you were going to do professionally. What kind of things would you do, or what kind of job would you have?
Uh, that's a tough one. I've only been in this job for a year, and I'm excited to see where it goes, because ideally, what I wanted to do in leaving the Forest Service was just to get more time in the field with a little less structure. Um, Working for the Forest Service was good for a while, but it is, it's part of the government, so it can get messy, and I I like to have a little more, creative freedom and things like that. So if if I get a lot of field time, a lot of opportunity to um, develop skills and do more research about, our native plants and native wildlife, then that really is what I want to do. So I guess I've just got to wait and see where this job goes, and if it gets me there, then I'll be really happy in it. If I don't get to spend a lot of time in the field and still end up in front of the computer a lot, then I'd probably go out and look for something that I could be field going most of the time and
Sure.
be doing a lot more surveying and research.
Yeah, I know when people ask me about what I do too, right? They're like, "Oh, you're in the outdoor rec, natural resources stuff," and I'm like, sometimes it's great, but I
Yeah.
don't think people realize how much time behind a computer, we have to spend overall,
Yeah.
or whatnot. And, uh,
Yeah.
it gets tough. I had to take. I went out yesterday to the Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site, and I had to get out. I was like, we've had bad weather for the last week and a half, so to speak, right? And so I've been
Hmm.
sitting behind a computer a lot, and I was like, I can't do this. I have to go do something else. Um, so before we close out, a couple of different questions. I don't know if it's a couple. When you think about your career path and things that you've done, you've probably had some times you've felt like you've been successful and not successful, right? And so regarding different, you don't have to talk about those, but think about like, I guess my question is, do you have any like advice or golden nuggets of wisdom that you could share with us about things that you wish you knew or things you wish you'd done better or things you did right? You know what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, yeah. If you're so getting involved, I mentioned earlier that Student Conservation Association is a great way to get started in a career in natural resources, whether it's with the Forest Service or if you are interested in jumping into the private sector and working as a contractor or with a contractor. That field experience is a really it's necessary to get started. And if you are looking into joining, working with the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, national parks, anything like that, um, the biggest thing, because you're going to be applying through USA Jobs, the federal resume is important. You got to get past the bots first. So I highly recommend talking to someone. You can talk to me. I don't care if you want to shoot me an email, or if you know someone who's been through that experience, do some research. Um, because they have algorithms that look for certain keywords. So it's important to build your resume and your experience sort of based on the jobs you're looking at. If it's a wildlife monitoring position, they'll want you to have something in there about wildlife monitoring, maybe specific tools that you've used, which is another great reason that anything like Student Conservation Corps or AmeriCorps, which is a similar program, the two are usually connected. Those are good ways to get started because you're not necessarily going to be using some of those tools in everyday life, like a hypsometer. You've probably never even heard that word before unless you have worked in forestry. Um, so I recommend looking into those programs and getting started that way. Going to your professors or anyone for advice who would be able to help you with the process of creating a resume and writing your cover letters and things like that. Because, like I said, get through the algorithms and the bots, and then you'll get to a real person, and it gets a lot easier from there.
And for we've had a couple different people talk about that same process and getting through that initial firewall, if you would, is what I call it, initial barrier. Um, you know, when you think about your resume development, all that, is there any tips you have? You got to craft it to each job you apply for, but overall, is there any tips that you have for keeping that resume or things to do to kind of polish that?
Yeah, if you're building a federal resume in particular, so it's a little different than the resume that you create in a Google Doc or a Word doc. It's completely electronic. It doesn't matter if you keep it to one page. You're just listing your past experience, and obviously you want it to be the most relevant experience. But the biggest thing I recommend with those federal resumes is looking at each job description and pulling some keywords from those documents.
Yeah. And then we had somebody else tell us, you're basically you're going to put down everything you've ever done no matter what it is, right? Is that something you would advise
Mhm.
as well?
Yeah, with the federal resumes, like I said, you're not trying to keep it to a one clean page, so you can, go all the way back to something you did in high school if it was relevant.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
um, Tara, that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share before we let you go for the morning?
I guess the only other thing I would say is, just don't be afraid to get out there. And when I the first time I applied to natural resource jobs, I probably applied to like 30 all over the country. And once you've been on USA Jobs, you realize it's not that crazy to apply to that many things. If you want to go to Alaska, apply to something in Alaska, maybe you'll get it. Um, and it's a really good experience just to get out there and see some places while you have the time to, you know, work 6 months at a time, or you could even work 3 or 4 months if you want to get involved while you're still in college. You can just do it for the summer. But yeah, just don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone and go work somewhere you've dreamed of seeing.
Yeah, go explore a little bit, right?
Hmm.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for taking your time this morning. And I know I'll probably, not probably, I will email you right after this and follow up later this afternoon, I guess. But I sincerely appreciate you taking your time this morning. And it's
Yeah,
always makes me smile to hear what you're up to and that you're doing well. So make sure
yeah,
you stay in touch, all right?
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Have a good morning.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk to you later.
All right, bye.